You're listening to The Adventuring Party, talking about gaming the Irish way. Welcome to the party. I'm your sometimes host, SavageMick, and this is a very special episode for us. I'm sure you've twigged by the title card or the thumbnail or the RSS header. Are those still a thing? Anyway, if we're going to go back down memory lane, I'm joined tonight, in this timeless void, by some very good friends, some of whom have been on the show before, some of whom you'll be familiar with from our Discord. Join our Discord. And some who are joining us for, I believe, no, not the first time, in fact. I think, in fact, everyone here is returning to the show. Ignore that preamble. We have indeed my good friends and soon-to-be yours, Jude, Colin, and Bill, who also happen to be one of my very first gaming groups. Why do I say this? Why do I mention this? Well, because we're going to sit down, haven't sat down together for a long time, and we're going to attempt to review the new Dungeons and Dragons movie, Honor Amongst Thieves. Honor with a U, which has done quite well. We're recording this on the 10th of April. You'll be hearing it roughly sometime this week. I believe the box office tickets for the opening weeks or weekends for the movie were pretty good. Guys, we've all been to see it, and at various times and places, sometimes together. But before we get into the movie itself, Dungeons and Dragons, formative game for most of us. Is that fair to say?
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
I think, let me see. Bill, you were one of our first GMs, although I think we all took a go somewhere down the line. But I think you ran a game for us that was pretty much set the tone.
So I think I was the D&D, the AD&D GM, whereas I think Colin, you were the Woofrup GM, and then Jude, you were Kindred of the East, and Dragonlance. So I think I was the AD&D guy, starting off with the new easy to master black box, and then it was after that we ran off the AD&D Second Ed books back in 94, 96. Those types of deep history years. 30 years ago, man. 30 years.
Yikes. Yeah, we're black box kids, which
Yep.
is probably one of the lesser known boxes. A strange kind of concept album of D&D that surfaced on toy store shelves or in the Argos catalog. I think is where I found it. Yeah, so we've all run. I can't remember if I ever ran anything for you guys. Maybe Shadowrun or something like that. But D&D certainly wasn't the only thing about town in terms of systems for us to play as a burgeoning gaming group. But it sure as hell has a lot of kind of nostalgic cachet, which I think this film is kind of cashing in on a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what I would say is that while we did run other games, Bill's D&D game, that original Planescape game, was almost certainly for me anyway the first kind of genuine long format campaign. Well, I'd played some other bits and pieces. I know you and me, Mick, had played some Werewolf, a bit of Shadowrun, but it had typically been if we got 2 or 3 sessions in of something, we were doing really well. Whereas that Planescape game was the first time we genuinely, we had, here's the day on the week, and we will meet up and we will play for hours together, and we'll damn well do it again next week and the week after and the week after.
Yeah,
so absolutely, that was in terms of launching a career of hardcore RPG gaming, tabletop stuff. That game, very much the cornerstone.
Yeah, I hadn't realized it was so important until just now. You're right. We've just been throwing stuff at the wall, and then we met this guy with a plan, and pulled us together.
We did our damnedest to make absolute tatters of his plan on every opportunity.
Yes, plan, right? Yes. Mm-hmm.
Jude, any fond memories of the early days?
Yeah, well, I think that's the first campaign. Well, it's first as content, it's the first campaign, really proper campaign that I got my teeth into. But more importantly, and more memorable for me, was that it was the first time I felt my character had an arc. My elf ranger in Bill's game, really developed as a character from the traditional hippie elf into a really angry, bitter, shriveled up ranger who just despised everybody. But I felt it was organic. I felt like the story brought him to where he was, and that's something that sticks with me from that campaign.
The story of our friendships, really. Life and art reflected. Yeah, you're definitely right, nailing that idea that these characters got to kind of stick around and develop and rub off each other a little bit. So look, I'm indulging myself here. It's great to have you guys on, especially given that we're all sat here now as kind of 40-ish year old dudes who have gone and seen a big budget, honest to goodness, actors you can name, production of this game as a movie, an adaptation, and that's like, whoever thought we'd get to see that? Well, I mean, go back to, was it 2000, 2002, when Jeremy Irons was eating the scenery. But I think it's fair to say that those early movies did not really live up to the D&D we had in our head. And the unfortunate thing is that if you go back 20 years prior to that, the mid 80s, there were lots of good fantasy movies made, but they were all kind of independent properties. They were all kind of Legend and
Time Bandits.
Time Bandits is pretty good. Yeah. If you want to go Planescape, then Time Bandits is about as close as you could get up until this point.
They have a flying ship, man. It's as spelljammer as you get.
I think you hit the nail on the head, though, because a lot of those were independent licenses. What was attached to the D&D movie was an IP that we were familiar with and expecting things from. Quality of the 2000 film aside, it did not do good by its brand, by the IP. And I feel like there's two ways you can go in movies now when you're attached to an IP. Is one, you can barely use it. You see that in Resident Evil, for instance. And the other is that you can just oversaturate, like I feel like the Warcraft movie did, which is where you alienate audiences who aren't familiar with the source material.
That's fair. I think the Warcraft one is a good example about how you can over-egg the pudding. Of like, you can have great stuff and there's potential to carve something out, but if you overshoot that runway, then like that doesn't work either.
So the other thing I would say about that earlier movie, I keep thinking of it as the Jeremy Irons movie, possibly because I can't remember anybody else who was in it. There's Profion, who chews on the scenery. He's the bad guy. And then there's a bunch of rather nameless others. But the thing about that movie was I thought it did okay at ticking the boxes of this is a D&D movie. In this, it was very clearly fantasy. It had its magic and dragons and wizards and beholders and all that kind of stuff. What it failed at was capturing any of the experience that you actually have at a table. And I think that is something that Honor Among Thieves absolutely nailed.
Yep.
So they did the same thing. That it's packed full of all the bits and pieces that you require to go, hey, look, this is a D&D movie. It's got all the bits you know and love from the IP. But then the way they wrote it, the style, the humor, I think they really did a great job of capturing the kind of lightning in a bottle that you get around a table where everybody's having fun.
Yeah. I'd completely agree with that. And I'd say that's exactly like, if you told me that movie was the transcript of, or like, a re-edited, reworked transcript of somebody's particular home game, I'd go, okay, sure, I'd buy that. That's plausible. Whereas some of the other ones, it's clearly like it's been written according to a script, and like, yeah, you didn't see how it came off the table.
Yeah, one of those movies was written by some people who were informed what D&D is about, and one of them was written by people who have played the game.
Yep.
Okay, well, I'm gonna stick a stick in that spoke. Actually, the original D&D movie and the two follow-ups, they were produced by some superfan who managed to blag their way into the WotC offices and convince them to let him make a movie. As it turns out, I can't remember the guy's name now.
I didn't even realize there were sequels.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
it's too like
yeah, no.
we're going to Eastern Europe to film the second one. Okay, I mean that makes sense. It's or we're gonna go direct to video. Okay, what about the third one? We're going further east to film the third one. We don't have any money. It's really bad.
I
But
think
you
that
can
the Book
make
of Wild Darkness one lacks any evidence that it's a D&D movie other than the name referencing the Book of Wild Darkness. I think if you took its name away, there is no evidence that it is a D&D movie.
yeah,
Like
and
it is
I-
just
they're gonna suffer
completely
for it
removed from the IP.
because they simply didn't have any money to spend. Or, but the
Yeah.
guy who made them, the guy who championed them, like he was a big D&D head. However, I think it's fair to say he didn't really understand how to get a picture made. At least not to not to capture the magic that happens inside. Getting a thing kind of melded from one kind of transposed or transcribed or adapted, the word I'm looking for, from one medium to another. Very clearly, the people who wrote and directed and made Honor Among Thieves, as you say, Colin, have definitely played D&D and love it. But they're also, probably even more importantly, very adept filmmakers. And the script and writing credits, the directing credits for the team put together, so to speak for themselves. They've done Game Night, did Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 2. They've done a bunch of movies that kind of just stand up.
I think they were involved with Spider-Man: Homecoming as well, and I think
That's the one I'm missing. I've nearly swallowed my ice. Oh, help.
don't swallow that. That's a clear non-alcoholic liquid. But I think
Yeah.
that's really important because I don't think Honor Among Thieves as a movie would have had a chance of being made if it hadn't been for the successes that Marvel have had with particularly their more comedic outputtings. I think there is so much of Guardians of the Galaxy
Yeah.
and the second Thor movie, the one that's really funny.
The third one, just to clarify, folks, he does not mean Thor
yeah,
Dark World.
you're right. You're 100% right.
The Dark World is funny in its own way.
Yeah. I didn't mean Thor Ragnarok. I was trying to avoid the fourth one. Blood and Thunder is
I
not
like
as good.
the fourth one, but yeah.
It's fine.
I
But
don't think it deserves the criticism, but it's not great.
Yeah. But Ragnarok is great. But without Guardians and without Thor Ragnarok, this movie would never have been greenlit because it's just silly action, high fantasy nonsense.
Yeah.
And it's very well executed, which is the criticism I would have of Blood and Thunder. But yeah, they're building on this framework that Marvel managed to put together, and coming from a very similar sort of source, I guess, comics and RPGs. You know, you've got this kind of geek culture IP that is transitioning into something big and mainstream, and as part of its transition, has to make an effort to break outside of its established audience. You don't get to make a movie like this if you can't pitch to your producers, yeah, you're going to spend 150 million, but look, we can make this bigger than it could be. You know, we're not just aiming this at our hardcore D&D fans. They're great and all, but we need more than that.
Okay, we're kind of into the review section now, and folks, if you're listening along at home, you haven't seen the movie, we're going to hold off spoilers until the last kind of 10-15 minutes. And we will say spoilers. There'll be a great big voice that comes down from the production cloud and goes, "Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert!" Something like that. But we're so we're a round table now. How do we review this movie as a anarcho kind of syndicalist collective?
Well, I think
not what I voted for.
No, not at all. I mean, the bit that, like, the two things that propped up. One, I completely agree with the point about being able to go up to a bunch of producers and say, we want to make fantasy Guardians of the Galaxy. That's like one line statement of people going, oh yeah, okay, here's my check. That probably made things a lot easier. But could it have been done? Would even that have worked if we hadn't had the kind of the tilling of the field that was Stranger Things and all of the actual play podcasts that have been out there kind of like breaking ground for people who are more than just the standard organic growth D&D tables? Like, I think those are probably also
Absolutely.
seeded things that Honor Among Thieves has now harvested.
Yeah, you could make a lot of favorable comparisons to the Vox Machina series,
Also, yeah.
But I think as a collective, like, you have to give a nod to 5th edition as well. I don't think with the audience that D&D had, definitely for 4th Ed, probably for the editions, some of the editions beforehand, you could have made it successful a movie. But with 5th edition, you have, a line from Hasbro that's outselling their toy lines. You have an inbuilt fan base there that at least forms the seed of the people that want to watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's that inward and outward pressure. A very, very successful run on D&D at the moment for the people inside the tent. They're pushing out and sort of expanding to new places. And then there's the inward pressure, the nostalgia factor, the name check recognition that things like Stranger Things and Rick and Morty and a lot of other shows, Community, lots and lots of shows that have referenced D&D over and over and over again for the past, I don't know, 30, 20, at least certainly the last 20 years, as the people who play D&D become the people who make the kinds of TV and movies that we watch.
Yeah, I don't think we're allowed to watch that episode of Community anymore, but anyway.
Only one of the two we're not allowed to watch.
All right, okay.
I haven't seen it. I just know that there's like the Cones of Dunwich or something is a thing.
That's a different
Never mind.
show entirely.
It's a whole
really?
other discussion.
Okay, there you go. It's kind of that. It's in the Gestalt. It's in your mind.
But I get where you're coming from. The general commercial success of 5th Ed and the kind of the move out of basement counterculture nerdist, whatever you want to call it, into more mainstream stuff has obviously been a driving force. The money is just there now, so big companies are like, yeah, sure, we'll put more money into this because we'll get more money out of it. And on that, one of the things I noticed is that in all the reviews and in the credits, it's Hasbro's Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh yeah.
No mention of Wizards of the Coast. And I did also see them getting some criticism and flack in that while they got a thanks at the very end of the credits, there was no credit, kind of main body of the credits towards Gygax and Arneson for the creation.
They didn't get a Bob Kane.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's, if you go and watch a Marvel movie, Lee and Ditko and all those are credited at every opportunity. That did not happen.
Right.
Even, given that's in the Forgotten Realms, Ed Greenwood.
Yeah.
Like, he too, and I think it's like,
so
he even still holds copyright, like 50%, whatever, some fraction.
And this feels like, to me, it feels like this is the big company going, whoa, well, we're actually making money now, okay, and not necessarily paying quite enough attention to the detail of the history of it all. There's very little reason not to give credit to creators and writers, unless, like, it's either carelessness or there was some money on the line.
Yeah.
And look, it took a while for the comic book movie stuff to get around to Bob Kane. It may be that they've just got to kind of relearn those lessons, assuming there's any more of these. But let's talk in a general review sense about the actual movie itself. It opens. Okay, this movie is set in a recognizable part of the D&D universe, the Sword Coast, the Forgotten Realms. And it takes us on a kind of a red line on the map journey through a few different places that people who are familiar with the source material to recognize. But I suppose the really good job it does here is that it also introduces first timers to the kind of the setting and gives them a sense of the scale of the world before the plot proper kind of gets started. Then we've got in the lead roles, and there are a few. It's a good ensemble movie. Is that fair to say? It's not really overshadowed. We've got Chris Pine, obviously, as the leader, the most recognizable, biggest face in the poster. Michelle Rodriguez playing. So Chris Pine is playing Edgar? No.
Edgin.
Edwin?
Edgin.
Edgin, the Bard. Michelle Rodriguez playing Holger the Barbarian. Regé-Jean Page playing Simon the Sorcerer.
No.
What? No, he's
No.
not.
No, he plays
Oh, sorry, is that
He's-
that's Zand?
Regé-Jean
he's-
Page plays Zenk,
Zenk.
the Paladin.
Yes.
Zenk the
Justice
Paladin,
Smith
okay.
plays Simon the Sorcerer.
You're absolutely right. And then we got Sophia Ellis playing Doric the Druid, and Hugh Grant playing Forge the Rogue. Yes,
Yep.
Forge Fitzwilliam, I believe. I don't want to give too much away for people who haven't seen it, but not all of this party stay sort of center of frame for the entire film, but they all have their moments to shine. And we follow our group, our intrepid party, as Edgin attempts to reunite with his daughter, and as it turns out, save a city, defeat the big bad, etc., etc. Who knew? It's fair to say that the structure of this movie is kind of ripped straight from, your first adventure in D&D. It's pretty standard campaign stuff. Is that something that disappointed people? Would people have preferred to see more of a save the world? The bigger stakes, or did
No.
you guys
no.
think it worked?
Not for first movie, certainly. We'll do that later.
I think to Colin's earlier point, like it plays well to the Guardians riff of starting with more localized small stakes, that and help establish a group of characters. And obviously the stakes escalate obviously in the film, but I think it does good in starting with more personal, items rather than heading straight to, well, the world's ending and you're involved.
And
Yeah.
can I just dial up the geekiness to a slightly higher degree and say when you listed out the 5 classes, I'm like, that's a really well-rounded party. Somebody put effort in there. You've got your paladin for tanking, your barbarian for smashing stuff. You've got bard providing support, druid doing everything because they're a druid, and then there's a sorcerer is also there.
They have the rogue.
And the rogue, of course, yes.
I was going to say you're a little light on healing, but okay.
You have a paladin and a druid.
Yeah.
And to be fair,
And a bard. It's a bards
going
can
into the
heal
nitty-gritty, druids have the most powerful healing spell in the game, so
That's fair.
But anyway, sorry, carry on. Where were we?
I can't really say much more than that in the very general view. Should we?
So if we want to go through some stuff, we won't trigger the spoiler warning just yet.
Okay, yeah.
There's definitely stuff we can address for the folks who haven't seen it. First of all, I would say go and see it. It's a good movie. That would be my initial takeaway. It is a funny movie. They dialed up the humor much higher than I was expecting, and it's fairly non-stop. Like I said, Guardians of the Galaxy and Thor Ragnarok, those are that's the ballpark you're in, and I would say the humor and the jokes are probably even more rapid fire.
And if we can reach back to when they were making this kind of movie, and no one blinked an eye, Princess Bride kept coming to mind just for the sharpness of the script and, as I say, the tempo of the humor. Throughout. Now, I'm not suggesting this is as good as that by any means. A movie that still stands up today, but it certainly has that kind of those very charismatic actors delivering very funny kind of in-world stuff and never really breaking outside of it. Princess Bride is more fourth wall breaking than this movie ever even had the potential to. There was a lot of speculation as to, will we get to see the players at the table? And while I can point, and we'll go into the spoilers, I think there's very clever parts of the script that indicate that this is a game being played by people. It never
Well-
actually ever breaks the fourth wall.
That was, for me, that was the biggest takeaway. If you are out there and you have played a bunch of D&D and had those games and those moments around games where someone delivers a line out of nowhere and the whole table cracks up, this movie is full of that.
Yep.
Like
Yeah.
the humor in particular was just, this is real around the table humor for me. It's like we're doing stuff and then suddenly there's a joke about a potato. And the potato joke is suddenly really funny, and there's no good explanation. If you took that potato joke in isolation and just examined it, it'd be crap. But it's not crap because you're sitting around the table having lots of fun, and somebody's made a joke about a potato that happens to work directly into the plot, and suddenly it's hilarious.
Yep.
And this is why, even before I went, I would have looked into the writers and so on, I could tell the people involved in putting that script together have plenty of experience. They know what they're on about.
Yeah, and moving away from the humor of it, from a setting point of view, if you are a D&D fan, this is the core setting of the 5th edition. It is set, as Mick said, in the Sword Coast in Forgotten Realms, and every location they hit is featured in an existing campaign. Like everything, every beat of it is recognizable if you have played the campaigns. A lot of people went to the cinema and said, "Oh, and they see in the trailers, there's the chubby dragon." Players from Out of the Abyss know his name. They have met him, and I think they went out of their way to make this fit into people's experience of D&D. I think in terms of hitting on not just locations but recognizable locations, not a random town that's in the middle of a forest somewhere that is barely mentioned, but hitting upon places that people have seen. Even as the first shot opened, I was like, "Oh, I know that place." Yeah.
Well, I guess the setting is rich enough that you get to pick good locations to set your story. And it turns out that they work really well on the screen as well because they're interesting. The frozen north is an interesting visual location. Neverwinter itself, as realized in the movie, is quite good. I believe they use a lot of sets for Game of Thrones. I certainly watching it was like, man, they've shot a lot of this in what look like real castles. They've got there's not a lot. There's no wobbly set syndrome here. The money's on screen. And it feels like the metropolis in a fantasy world. Hell, it's not even the biggest one, I know. And then I don't, is mentioning the place they go under the ground, is that a spoiler? Is that no? Well, it's well realized. It's everything you'd hope to see for just the short amount of time that they spend there. So yeah, the locations are good. The characters we like just as a party and as a bunch of people to follow around on an adventure. I was really impressed by a couple of things. How well made the film is in terms of camera work and direction and interesting ways of displaying the action. And leading on from that, how good the action is. I really enjoyed and could follow and appreciated all the different kinds of action they had in this movie. A lot of different, what would you call them, set pieces. Any standouts for folks?
Well, what I would say about them is if you have been used to the ensemble action of, say, Marvel movies, which, I think this movie owes a lot to, this takes a very different route. Because when I think of the action scenes, there's like 4 big set pieces. 2 of them, here is Michelle Rodriguez doing a big action scene. And one of them is here's Regé Jean Page doing an action scene, and then there's the ensemble fight. You don't have the constant kind of, well, all of our characters are all fighting. It's like, here's this character kicking the crap out of stuff, which is a refreshing change when you've got your ensemble movie, and not everybody has to be brilliant in every fight. Not everybody is contributing equally. In fact, Edgin is the most useless bard I've ever seen. I mean, he doesn't do anything.
He comes up with plans for when the plans fail, man.
Yeah. Well, he does.
He sits on a really important rock. I think we should go into spoilers now.
Okay.
Because there's actually not. I don't think there's much. Go on.
I don't think we need to don't jump in straight away because I think
Okay.
there's a base layer of appreciation that needs to be applied. Like I would say this.
Go see this movie.
Yeah, go see this movie. But the plot's not going to set the world on fire. It is,
No.
not the most original character arc. It's not. It is not. I doubt it's going to see the sort of length of time that something like, as you said, The Princess Bride does. But it's a enjoyable, fun romp that plays really well to its license without drowning it in technicalities.
Yeah.
And I think if you're a fan of D&D, if you're playing it, you'll recognize things like round durations, concentration spells, things like that. Like there's lots of nods that don't take away from the story in any shape or form if you don't know what you're looking at.
Yeah, anything they get explicit about, they explain it without sitting you down and going, right, we're going to have to tell you about D&D now. They managed to work some of the most niche rules in the game into interesting front and center pieces that actually like make the story work in ways that I just wasn't expecting.
So I went along to this movie with my good lady wife, who has played some D&D, but wouldn't be super au fait with, say, Forgotten Realms, hasn't played 5th edition, is a little bit rusty on all that kind of front. And from her view, there was clearly an awful lot going on that me, who knows all of this stuff, and I'm like, oh, there's that tiny little reference to the thing with the what's it in the place, and that would have flown straight over her, but that didn't matter. Any of the stuff that actually matters, they do explain in just enough and in just enough detail so that they can follow along. And they do a really good job of showing rather than telling. There's relatively little sort of sit down and just, I'm now going to exposition all over the place verbally. It'll be messy and long and boring, but deal with it. There's a lot more kind of just stuff is going on, and here's some hints on the screen, and that's all you need to know.
Yeah.
So for those who are concerned about the movie being difficult to approach for the non D&D fans, it's not. Just go into it going, here's a fun fantasy action comedy. It does have a setting. You can tell that it's got a setting. It doesn't bother going into details of the setting because none of that matters to the plot that much.
Yep. I'd support that. I'd say like it works on three levels, and the more of them that work for you, like gravy, like better and better. Like it is a good fantasy movie that stands up on its own. I would say someone who knows nothing about the setting or the likes could walk in and be like, that was a good time, I don't want a refund. Then on top of that is like, if you know something, anything about D&D and how the game is played, you're going to get a bunch of like, oh yeah, that's like, or if you know any TTRPGs, not necessarily Forgotten Realms, like if you play any kind of tabletop, you'd be like, oh yeah, that's definitely how a game is played reflected on screen. And then there's a third level of like, if you know the Forgotten Realms Sword Coast and have campaigned all across it, there's a bunch of references that you're going to get. So like all of those stack up. But even if you've never played before, and you don't know the world so well, it's still a good fantasy movie, well worth going to see.
And you can bring your kids and your gran. I think that's this is an incredibly friendly movie for a lot of different audiences. There's nothing too scary in it, but it's not so saccharine as to be boring.
Yep.
It's not a there's a message, there's a theme, but it's pretty easy to swallow. And along the way, you get to see some very enjoyable actors working pretty well with what they've got to work with, which is, for my mind at least, an above par script for this kind of movie, and it could certainly have been a lot worse.
I'm going to give them an extra bonus point for managing to craft a trailer campaign that did not spoil anything serious.
Yeah, like folks, if you're on the fence, having sort of seen this, why am I trying to convince these people? They'll either go and see it or not. But I really enjoyed, like, whoever made that trailer made a fun, interesting, and involving trailer that made me want to see the movie. And then I saw the movie and realized that they're a pack of liars. Like
Well,
everything in that trailer is a misdirection in some way.
it's funny, because having watched the trailer after seeing the movie now, it's full of spoilers. Like it is legitimately packed with spoilers for that film.
See, now I got to go and watch the trailer again.
Cannot discern them. Like it calls out who villains are that you don't know are villains necessarily early on. You know, it puts the players in a, you know, again, it was a great trailer that had me, you know, that brought hope back to me because I had no hope for another D&D movie. But and it didn't spoil it for me, as Mick says. I went and saw it. I enjoyed every piece of the movie, but I saw the trailer recently afterwards and went, hold on a second. Maybe it's a thing of having seen the movie, but there are legitimate things where you're like, if you were to analyze the trailer, you could probably figure out chunks of this movie.
Yeah, put it that way. Whereas, like, yeah, if you went over it frame by frame, but it's having watched the trailer and got like, oh, okay, I think this is what's going to happen in the movie then. Like, if it's dumping all the major beats onto the screen in the way that some of these other things do, you're like, okay, this is how that movie's going to go. And then the movie went completely differently.
Okay, unless someone's actually going to hold me back now, I'm going to hit the spoiler warning button. So I think now is the time, right?
That's fair.
Someone has to physically restrain me, except it is now spoiler warning. Spoiler warning. If you want to go and see this movie, if we've convinced you somehow that you want to go and see this movie without getting spoiled, and it's been out a couple of weeks, turn off now. I'm sure we've been perfectly good company for the last however long we've been recording.
We've also been really positive about the movie and said almost nothing negative about it.
Okay, so let's open.
I can't believe
Jude,
that Darth Vader was Edgin's father.
Well, you know, it's a multiverse, you know. It's multiverses nested within each other. All right, what have you been burning to say in terms of spoilers? Let's start with you, Jude.
I don't know if it's burning so much as I think Wizards have a campaign here, or Hasbro, whoever you want to credit to. But you see the obviously Red Wizards emerge as villains of the piece. You know, beyond the initial story of Edgin's daughter, and we know now from the D&D director there's a big Red Wizard campaign coming. Pay is something they haven't touched in 5th Ed, so to me it feels like they are moving to align that. In the same way they tried to align Baldur's Gate 3 to Descent into Avernus release, but that kind of went horribly wrong with the delay of Baldur's Gate 3. But it feels like the movie is potentially setting in motion some aspects of their future campaigns and potentially future movies. And we know there's a TV series coming, for instance. That was good. It was good for me. I really liked it because they touched on a villain that we know exists in Forgotten Realms we hadn't seen in 5th Ed. It's been over 10 years since Tay was explored in any detail. Yes, the Red Wizards have popped up in campaigns, but only as like emissaries and adjuncts and no one of great import. It was great to see like the leader, Saztam, the big guy, come into play and be like, okay, these guys are a force and they're making a big move into the realms. That for me was that was a big thing for me as a Realms fan. I was like, okay, yes, they're hitting at possibly one of the most potent characters alive in the realms today, and they're showing us that he's starting to make movements.
So you're expecting to see that showing up in the kind of the meta narrative of 5th Ed releases going forward, or whatever the next edition is going to be called. Where they try and carry people along who've been introduced by the movie, who are going to be like, yeah, Red Wizards are just the worst, and here's the campaign that proves it. And then long-term players and fans are like, yeah, it's been ages since we sorted the Thay thing. Let's go back to one of those fan favorites.
I
cool.
think so.
Yeah,
and if you watch the movie, subtle clues give way to in the background to the fact that it is contemporary to the current campaigns, and is in fact probably like the most current of the campaigns in theory. So
Yeah.
so what's happening in the movie is new to the realm.
That's right, because we saw it at the previous screening, and I turned around to you afterwards and says, Jude, you know a lot more about the Sword Coast and Forgotten Realms. Like, do you have any idea when this movie took place? And you were able to narrow it down to like 3 years, 3-year window where this
Yeah,
must have taken place.
yeah. There's a few clues, like who's in charge of Neverwinter, the fact Mount Houghton now has exploded, has erupted. So some of the things are basically narrowed down the timeline to the point where it has to have occurred past Waterdeep Dragon Heist, which is the previous sort of what's the word it's furthest on
Contemporary.
in the calendar. Yeah, it's the most
Right.
contemporary. So probably
Right.
in the 1490s, 92, 93.
I love
But
that.
again, that is nerd depth. But
Yeah.
again, my point was, I think that this is it's laying the groundwork for what will be an expansion into the actual tabletop world of the Red Wizard campaign. And that was great. I loved seeing that.
All right,
Yeah.
Colin, what is your burning truth that you must unleash?
Oh God, I don't know if there's anything. So, I think now that we're into the spoiler areas, not really burning, but I do want to throw some negative in here.
All right, yeah.
Because one of the issues I did have with the movie is there is a couple of points where they're just like they kind of hand wave from section to section, and the big standout for me is the escape from Tembershot. And they make
Dragon,
yeah. So you've got your great big chubby underdark dragon, and they, particularly on my second viewing, because I have seen the movie twice, they make a point during the big battle scene with him that he's having trouble igniting, not breathing out, but igniting his breath. He does this kind of hack cough thing, and you see these waves of gas, but you don't really see fire except for the one time when he breathes through a big column of burning lava or something. And that becomes the mechanism by which they escape him. But it just made no goddamn sense to me. It's like, oh, look, there's some salt water coming through here. We'll now we're trapped. All we've got to do is ignite the dragon's breath, which is 5 feet from us, and we are safe because we're 6 inches under the water, except for your hand, which isn't. And that will ignite with sufficient force to blast a hole through the ocean floor, and then we will swim up to safety. And I don't know.
Well,
Okay,
I hated
the intersection between movie logic and we have got.
But it wasn't even. If I was DMing that, I'd be like, no, that doesn't work. Well done. You ignited his breath. It instantly vaporizes the small pool of water. You were all scorched to death.
Look,
well done.
First, water's incompressible.
The boiling point of salt water is higher. You see, that's
not
and obviously, from the water dripping down, they were under the dark lake. That's the thing, right? That's how they swim up.
Right.
No, they weren't under the dark lake. It was salt water. They were under the sea on the surface.
And on that, does that mean that the Underdark is gone now? Because the ocean is draining into
the ocean is now draining into the Underdark, which is slowly filling. It's going to drive the drow to the surface.
Hey, there's a campaign.
It's draining into a hole that's plugged by a fat dragon who is now underwater. Well, yeah, you got to kind of. We have to get them back above ground for the rest of this movie to happen. This is what we're doing. Everybody, the next scene's on a beach. Just go with me here. Yeah, fair. It's a pretty. No, it's not as bad as movies that are like, and then it was nighttime. It's not that kind of. If you're not really sort of thinking about it, you're like, oh yeah, now they're on a beach because they came out of the water, because they were underwater, because they were under the ground, because.
Yeah, that's why I didn't finish that Die Hard movie.
All right, Bill. What has been gnawing away at your reason?
Well, the one thing that I mean, if I'm gonna, I've got, or rather, spoiler stuff. So the one thing that is kind of, I'm gonna say is my my most negative downside of all of this is like it is, while it's got a whole bunch of good, or rather, while I'm perfectly happy with it and I think it was great, there's a bit of the Marvel movie, the whole save the cat standard template movie to it, which like some of the, here's the moment where the ally is going to betray them. Here's the bit where they're darkest before the dawn. Here's the bit where etc. etc. And you could, like, it was deftly done enough that it did not spoil my enjoyment. But that's more of a kind of a like general gripe about many of these things, where after a bit you're like, how long? How where are we through the runtime? Okay, something's going to happen now. But okay, fine, whatever. But what the thing that I am going to like praise is the circling back to the point about show not tell, and the villain Safina. How we figured out how everything about her was revealed. In particular, as she turns up and she's in disguise, or like she turns up and she presents herself as like a slightly spooky part of the band to turn up, but like they all look like a bunch of misfits, so you don't know which one's the bad egg. And then things play out, and turns out she's the bad guy. And then okay, fine, so we know she's not good. And then the next time we see her as the kind of the vizier, and we're like, all right, fine, but like who exactly is in charge here? Is it Forge and she's his advisor or whatever? And then when when she drops the mask and we see like Zastam speaking from the shadows and she does her whole robes, I was like, oh, that's okay. So Forge is just the yapping dog kind of on the front of her longship. Right. Yeah. Okay. This is the actual power here. And it conveys that like these guys are seriously bad news before we ever get to Zenk's backstory, which then sort of like cranks the dial up by going and here's how they will stop at nothing. Like, and then that was these people don't care about their own population. They're perfectly happy to stab up each other. Nothing's too far for them to go. I thought that was like a great, like, here's how you show that the villain's bad and you should be worried about them, without going like they are, without doing sort of exposition of like, oh, they've like broken every bone from marrow from here to the coast. You're like, yeah, okay, fine.
So while you mention her, can we just quickly give a shout out to Daisy Head as Safina? We credited
Fantastic.
the other cast early on without spoiling. Yeah. You also see her in Shadow and Bone as a Taylor Grisha. Fantastic in her role, I have to say. Very believable as a Red Wizard of Tay.
Yep.
Yeah, and she plays this incredibly spooky, just off the wall, unnerving kind of villain. But for me, and she's good kind of villain material. But for me, the Forge Fitzwilliam character, like once you get to the tea scene, I was like, this man must have his eyes gouged out by the end of this movie for justice to have been served. Hugh Grant plays this amazing villain in this movie, who's former party member, a so rogue, who with acting as a puppet.
Well, hang on. I think he's a superb rogue. Okay, we don't see him stabbing anybody. He's clearly a skill-based charisma rogue.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, give the man credit.
Oh well, this is why I think he's the real villain of the movie, because our way into this movie is Edgin's trying to get his daughter back and trying to repair the mistakes of the past, get his wife back with this tablet of resurrection that is kind of the MacGuffin for the movie. And there you have Forge Fitzwilliam, who has taken the treasure, who has used it to parlay influence in Neverwinter and become Lord with the help of the Red Wizards, and has taken Edgin's daughter and basically fed her a pack of lies about her father, while ensuring he stays in prison. And he does all of this with a smile and a joke and a sort of chumminess, like, well, it's great to see you, but I'm gonna, you and Holger are gonna be thrown back in prison now, and I'm going to keep your daughter because I quite like the idea of someone who looks up to me and sees me as a great benefactor. And
I
a
agree.
good
He was
person.
absolutely
Oh, wow.
magnificent, and
Wow.
he was kind of over the top, ridiculously smarmy.
Yep.
I think he's the spiritual successor to Jeremy Irons' Scenery Chew in Profion, who
That,
was
I think
the archetype of the completely ludicrously over the top mega villain. And Hugh Grant was just he dialed the Hugh Grantish smarm up to about 12 and just went to town, and it looked like he was having a ball, and I hope he was. I hope he enjoyed it, because that's how it came across.
Well, I think he's definitely on track for the undo of the cast, to morph villain
Oh,
into
yeah.
more relatable hero later down the line. I can't. The directors have said that they're likely to put the same cast together again for another adventure. I can't see them doing it without Forge. He just seems like such a pillar of that party, even
Yond is very good,
if he's
yeah.
against them.
Someone who seems pretty despicable when you first meet them, and then it's more complicated than that later
But
on.
he was despicable.
He
And
was
Yeah,
despicable, I
he
know.
sacrifices
He's
his
awful.
city, knowing.
And the really fun part was, like, he appears to have had this devious plan to become Lord Neverwinter, and it turns out that wasn't really his plan. He
No.
manipulated his way to the leadership of one of the biggest cities in the entire world, fully in the knowledge of, well, I'm not here to actually rule. I'm just going to use my position to make even more money, and then run away with that.
It's
And
the plot
let
of every
everybody
good
die.
Act too.
Knowing what's going to happen to the people in the arena.
Yeah, knowing that they were all going to be sacrificed. It was ridiculous. It was wonderful.
Yes, while he makes off with the treasury and the waged fortunes that for the games that have been played out.
But not
in
just
Neverwinter.
of Waterdeep's treasury, but
No.
also the richest men from Baldur's Gate and Waterdeep as well.
Yeah, Neverwinter, Waterdeep.
Oh,
yeah,
again,
he's
another
got it all.
small parts, but nod to Brian Larkin and Nicholas Blaine as the two chancellors from Waterdeep.
Oh yeah, who are they?
Well, they're both relatively small bit actors who you see a lot in films in sidelines, but amazing job as just two, great characters that have very little screen time, but make your
They do
presence
well.
known.
Yeah, you pointed out, Jude, that like even characters with only a couple of lines, especially if they're kind of nobility or something, they're identifiably, these are characters from, or these are named NPCs in campaigns, like the parole board in the prison.
Yeah, the Absolution
Yeah.
Council. Yeah, pick
Yeah.
from actual members of the Absolution Council.
Yeah.
Per 5e campaign rules. Yeah, little details. Yeah, it really
Tons of stuff
they-
like that peppered throughout the movie.
that you don't have to know. It doesn't. You don't need it. It doesn't
Yeah.
stop the enjoyment of the film. But they went that extra mile. But
Yeah.
on that, and with a complaint, semi-complaint for the film.
Go.
If you're a rules lawyer, look, they do break
Oh
the
yeah.
rules. And you
I
can argue
want those wild shape rules for my druid, I'll be honest.
well, to be fair, you can easily argue that the druid is using the 1D&D rules, because that's a level 13 ability to switch forms as much as you want, as long as you do it within.
These are not level 13 characters.
You have to. Well, okay, that's another story. That's another debate.
Except for the paladin, except for Zank, who's
Yes,
clearly
yeah.
so much higher level than everybody else. And there's GM Fiat going, yeah, this NPC paladin who you've teamed up with briefly for the super dangerous part, he's not going any further.
No, he literally walks off out of the campaign.
One of my favorite jokes in the whole thing was him walking off and them commenting on he's so straight as a paladin that he will not even deviate. He walks over the rock. It was just wonderful.
That was apparently that was improv.
Really?
Yeah. So the paladin character, like, he says his goodbyes. No, it's your quest to continue on with now that I've gotten you out of the Underdark. Something about a dragon, and he just turns around, he walks off, and Chris Pine's character is just watching, going, Okay, very straight. Yeah, is he gonna? He gets to a big rock, and he, as Colin says, he just hops up and goes straight over the rock.
But
And
you also get the scene that the lines that you get anytime a powerful NPC interacts with a PC party, and the player Simon the sorcerer is like, "You're much better at all this fighting stuff for this. Come and help us." And the NPC comes up with this stupid nonsense bullshit. Oh, this is your quest. You must prove yourselves. It's like the world is at stake. You stupid idiot. Come and help us. It's like
I saw two takes on that. One of which was it's perfectly representative of it's the DM's like older brother or
right, yeah,
it's his old campaign buddy who's like only in town for one night, and he's like, yeah, sure, drop in as a guest to the table, and whips out like a much higher character from a better campaign before. That's why he's got like Helm of Disruption. Bullshit.
Nice armor, and
then he's like, yeah, he plays one session. He's like, I must go now because of course the guy was only here for one session, and then off he goes. And I read a thing that I read is in an interview for the movie makers, which I thought was hilarious. Was they were saying they wanted to set up Zenk as like from a different movie. He's actually there doing like Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
it's like
I get that vibe.
Epic, whatever, and yeah, sure.
He's even shot and lit differently. It reminded me a lot of Morticia Addams in the Addams Family, where she always has her spotlight. He's always kind of framed differently and lit properly, and he gets the slow motion leap through the air and stab the dragon in the skull. I don't think anybody else got a very cool slow motion flying through the sky kind of action shot.
Nope. But I thought that was like as a way to just frame the whole thing up, like, how do we make this stuff that clearly doesn't work not work? It's like, let's lean into the fact that D&D is a mashup.
Yeah.
This guy's from the DM's previous like epic fantasy campaign, and now we're doing a comedy one.
But we'll make it work. I think this is a very carefully made movie. As you pointed out, that there's different lighting and framing choices made for different characters. They borrow hugely from westerns for some of the choices they make in terms of framing, and there's some really distinctive, lifted straight from Marconi movies, camera choices where they'll foreground and then background sort of zoom to link things that are happening in a way that you usually see in kind of standoffs at high noon, that kind of thing. They do some really clever stuff with that. We even get a tumbleweed gag at the very end of the movie when when Simon and Safina are getting ready to sort of draw down the magical jewel, and it is a gunslinger moment.
Yep.
So there's some some really clever bits of camera work. Not to mention anything to do with the hither-dither and the heist part of this movie, where they're attempting to sneak into a treasure vault. The camera work there, when as things are rotating around different axes and frames of reference, you never get lost in terms of what's happening in the movie. As people pass through portals and are flipped upside down and are in motion relative to each other. I think it's a really competently made action movie. And Colin, you mentioned the fights as key scenes, but Doric's escape with all that wild shape is a chase sequence that's brilliantly shot. Although the CG is probably the weakest CG in the movie, and then the whole getting the portal into the vault is what I would consider another strong action sequence, because there's so many things happening and you're kept abreast of it all the time. It's given the last sort of 20 odd years of action movies, Jason Bourne and Transformers, anything by Michael Bay, that's just a mash of things happening on screen. They're very hard to follow. The Marvel movies are here and there in terms of how well the action shot. I can't remember seeing a movie with this many good, competent, like interesting action sequences one after another in quite a while. I think it works really well on that front.
And some great choices in shots there, like when we in the opening flashback when our characters visit Corrin's Keep, and you have the overhead shot of Corrin's Keep showing you the map as a DM of the area they're about to enter, which is fantastic. Like just that aerial shot, which again is not out of place in the movie if you know nothing about D&D. But if you're a player, if you're DM, and you're like, I'm looking at a top-down map, I'm looking at like a map of the area they're going to.
As soon as you see like something's kicking off here, it's time to roll initiative.
I
Um,
would just say I would like to go back to the wagon break-in scene and the use of the hither thither to pull that off. Like absolutely kudos, like not only for pulling it off, but just for like conceptually. All right, imagine we've got this widget and we need to make this work. I just thought there was like so many good ideas that I would be so damn proud if I was a DM and like my table came up with this. It's like, we're going to put a portal on a frame, we're going to have a picture in front of it. And you're like, okay, well, how are you going to get into a wagon? Aha, hold my beer. And like, the stuff they came up with, I would be like, oh, that's fantastic. Well done, guys. Like, we'll use a portal. Then I'm like, okay, well, you stuck it to the bottom. What are you going to do now? Oh, knock out the board. Then you're going to do the thing up. Magnificent. That was just so well done we're going to use the rules of this one magic item to like crowbar our way through this problem in a completely unexpected way.
It was also for me a perfect example of that technique, which I come to occasionally recognize as a mistake by the GM, of when your players put a ton of effort and thought and come up with a brilliant, ingenious plan to achieve the thing, and you let them get to a certain point, or they get to a certain point, and then you're like, you know what? Fuck them. I'm going to screw them over with some random bullshit, and your portal is now face down onto a rock.
Yeah.
Now what are you going to do?
Yeah, things were going too easy for you. It was so I, as the GM, feel obliged to just make it harder for no good reason.
Yeah.
There's some random crap to deal with.
Yeah, no, they should have. I completely agree. They should have. They'd earned that win. You should have been like, yes, you are now in the vault. Okay, I thought this would be harder, but we're not finished yet.
Even that serves a purpose because it forces them to revert back to a previous plan, which then puts half of the party in each of the locations, which of course gives us the reveal that another twist in the tale.
Yeah,
I know we're in the spoiler section, but I feel like I don't even want to spoil that really. It's just so even those moments where it's like, yep, the GM's gonna take his pound of flesh now, or their pound of flesh. Even that serves to eventually kind of move the story on in really interesting ways. Okay, we've had this while. There's so much more I'd like to say. Michelle Rodriguez, I mean, she got some of the best action scenes. She definitely gets some of the best fights. But she steals the rest of the movie. And can we talk about her ex?
Yeah.
There's
Like-
just
So again, I don't even know what I want to say about this, except it's a complete sidebar. It's like one of those, we're going to do a scene where your character gets closure on this thing from your backstory. And it's just, I sat there the first time I saw it.
I have to say, in preparation for this conversation, I had a quick look through a selection of reviews online. That scene came in for a whole bunch of criticism.
I know.
As being weird and awkward and making no sense. And part of me was like, you know what, they're kind of right. It's a little bit out of place. It's kind of strange. But then the D&D gamer in me was like, yeah, no, this totally makes sense. This is a thing that she had written down on a character sheet. Her heart is broken by this, her halfling husband who divorced her in a letter while she was in prison and has found an even bigger barbarian lady to shack up with.
A great example there is that the four of us are all playing in the same campaign, and in a tavern in 10 towns, two merchants walk in and start a 45-minute plot diversion that is purely connected to one character. But that is as you say, that is D&D happening. That is
that's how it works.
The DM has inserted the character's background and motivation at some point and levered it.
Michelle Rodriguez provided the DM with some background information for Holga. And he took it and he ran with it. He was like, "Here's a great place to insert the background you handed to me. I'm going to have some fun with it."
Actually, counterpoint. Either that, or the DM was like, "Okay, hey, right, yeah, you're going off to do your tomb cracking thing, speak with dead, etc., etc." And like, okay, we're heading from this point to this point, and Michelle Rodriguez player looks at the map and it's like, "Hey, that's going to take us right back past my exes. I'm going to stop in and solve that." The DM's like, "Fuck. Okay, how do I tie this off? He's found he's found an even bigger barbarian."
And I have to say that would have been a brilliant role, or not a brilliant role. That would have been easy role choice for someone like Matthew Mercer, Brennan Lee Mulligan, Luke
Yeah.
Gygax. I'm
Mhm.
glad it wasn't. I'm glad it didn't lean too heavy into here are the stars and the known names in D&D's community.
Mm.
I'd be happy for that in future films, but I was really glad to see they hadn't leveraged in cameos in that regard, and that it wasn't some well-known D&D person that 5 people in the audience were going to recognize.
Yeah, this is someone that if you paid attention to movies at all, you'll recognize this actor and be like, what is he doing here? What is he doing? What is
We're
this scene?
deep into the spoilers. It's Bradley Cooper. He's an A-lister.
Yeah,
This was he's literally the biggest name in the movie.
playing a diminutive house husband to
Yeah.
to Holga's barbarian, and it just cracked me up on every single level. And it doesn't overstay its welcome either. It's quite a short scene. Okay, so this movie has 2 dragons in it, and one in the title, but neither of them were really that important. But the other monsters in the movie, are all of them spoiled in the trailer? I think they are.
Yeah,
You don't see the well, they're only a passing shot, but you don't see the baby rust monsters. But
Oh, okay, but they're very kind of here. That's we're on our way to somewhere else. But they were good choices though. The owlbear has obviously got kind of top billing. I was delighted. The Displacer Beast, my favorite D&D monster,
Yep.
had such a good representation, great mimic, and gelatinous cube that the players use really well. It's clever, kind of the whole thing is. There's some good dungeoneering and lots of monsters in the movie, and I thought they came out they get a good showing without being, without pulling the focus.
Yep.
And I love the way the mimic was introduced because you got to see first of all Holga watch the one of the other contestant groups open a treasure chest and get something. So the
See,
next
I
one she sees-
assumed the first guy was going to get. As soon as I saw a chest, I was like, "That's a mimic."
Yeah.
When he
Well, the
opened that
editing
up
is-
and got a weapon, and I was like, "What the hell?"
Also, shout out to the 2 excellent groups of contestants in that, because not only did they nod obviously to the 80s cartoon, but
Yeah.
the other group is the 80s toys.
I didn't. I couldn't figure out who the other gang were. Okay.
Yeah, I thought it was. It was a nice little nod. There's no interaction with them. They don't get named. There's very little on-screen time. But I thought it was very good just to plant it in there and go, "Hey, remember these guys briefly?"
Yep.
Yeah, the standard. I mean, they're definitely one of those things that someone with a passing knowledge where you're like, this is a reference to something. But as you say, they're not. It doesn't trip you up. You're just like, well, they're groups. This is
And
during the
even as
arena kind of fight towards the end of the movie.
And even as you mentioned the dragons, I was glad to see that Rick or the Black Dragon wasn't the focus of the scene. That whole section is about what happens to the heroes and the helm thing between people. It's there was a dragon because they're fighting the cult of the dragon. There's the dragon, and then that's it. I was kind of glad it wasn't. This is the whole focus of our scene. We've paid for this dragon. We're going to damn well use it.
Yeah.
I thought they did make sure to get a proper Cult of the Dragon mask in there.
Oh, the outfits,
it
yeah.
was so recognizable. Having seen that stupid face and that stupid spiky mask on little tokens on Roll20 for so long.
Yep. I gotta say, I like
default cultist. Yeah,
it is the default cultist.
Yeah, I like the Rhaegar getting his, appearing in the background in a battle that went badly wrong, and I think it's here's why a dragon is a really big problem if you're facing him. Look, he's just making absolute
he's gonna
mince
bypass and acid breath everything in sight, and there's not much you can do about it.
Yep.
So I mentioned it earlier on in this review, but did anyone go into this movie thinking the attunement rules were going to be front and center for Simon the Sorcerer's development, and also giving us some pretty trippy visuals. And it's also every GM who sees this is going to steal it as an idea for their game. The idea that attunement would come up as a plot point in this movie.
I thought it was a good way to leverage his self doubt. I don't think necessarily they're laying the ground as that being the standard way you attune to items. I think it was a good way for them to go, hey, you're the person holding you back from being great. Your lineage and your comparison to that is preventing you from properly connecting with things. So I thought it was very well done. And of course, just the scene of him being thrown across the rocks in the beach was fantastic.
Good slapstick. So for folks who are playing along at home haven't seen it, while you're listening to this, they use attunement. They get hold of this helm that will negate magic, which they need to get into a vault, yada yada. And he tries to put it on, and he's confronted with an ancestor who refuses to let him attune, and this becomes something that he has to overcome during the course of the movie in a moment of crisis. And it's also got some really nice visuals attached. But attunement, like, it's hand waved in most games, and here it is brought front and center as a dramatic device. And I'd be shocked if you don't suffer through some epic attunements in the future in terms of your progress as characters. Any other kind of rule stuff?
One thing on that with the helm, that's the one, like, as I understand, is like knocks down everything. Like, it is a complete magical null field using Mordenkainen's disjunction.
It appears to be directional.
Yeah, but that was the thing that I thought. Like, the one thing he sort of goes like bazonk, he trips it, he blasts, like, since we're spoiling, but like, sort of, it works, it breaks through the seal that he was aiming at. It also knocks the guys behind him flat in their ass. So I'm assuming
No, he in fact had turned and waved his hands in the direction of those guys.
Oh, had he? Okay.
The seal was behind him.
Okay. Okay.
And this was another area where the plot got all a bit wishy-washy. Was that supposed to be the disjunction hitting all of the magic across the city?
Well, yeah,
I think so. With the floating, what you call those levels?
The load.
Well, it seems to it's a cone with maybe a 6-foot area of effect around the wearer, and then a cone that flies out about 300 or 400 feet and knocks in a bunch of glow globes and things like that.
It's like a rocket launcher with backblast, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. One thing that I thought about that was then, like, that happens, and then the immediate next thing is someone pings him on his message, on his, like, sending stone. I'm like, that thing should be dead.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
That was the one bit where I was like, hang on a minute, in the movie. That was the only one I was like,
turned off at the time. It was fine.
Well, the sending stones are definitely one of the things, even that aside, that are definitely rule of cool rather than here's the actual rules for this.
Sure.
They're not magical walkie-talkies.
Yeah.
Although they do give feedback.
that was a great joke.
Funny.
Yeah, that was.
Oh, if we want to talk about magic being used for joke, the illusion spell.
Oh, that was great.
Chris Pine is distracting some random guards. They just really want to get this in. It was kind of weird because as it's presented, it doesn't sort of just get wishy-washy fade out. He starts to glitch in a way that, like, younger people would recognize as this is a weird glitch that's happening. And
there was a skipping record.
A skipping record, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then he loses.
Then it all starts to melt.
Yeah. It goes a bit Mr. Soft, and it is very well done, very funny. Again, one of those things that'll probably get nicked because it's concentration, right?
That scene was nearly ruined for me though by the Simon getting his foot stuck in a hole.
Yeah, so
like there's just this random, completely random hole that happens to trap a foot. What the hell?
Yeah, it was hard setup, to be fair. I think
the film is rolling so quickly at that point. You're just sort of, it's like setting up jokes in Airplane or
to the film's credit, they stumble in a few places, but it's so rapid fire, it's so high paced that they get away with it.
I do like that idea though, because he's casting Major Image. He hasn't lost concentration, but maybe he's not rolling particularly well. So there's ramifications
of success, coming
in. Yeah, it's like, you haven't you haven't dispelled the image, but you're distracted.
Okay, I don't know how to end this.
Well,
I think we kind of have to.
Well, I think at this point I have to wonder. Like the four of us are here. Can we get a session in? Bill, got something to hand?
Oh, there's
I-
okay. Is this? Do you think this is a film that is going to persuade people to give the game a go?
we
Or is
are.
that even its job?
So sorry. Okay, I've got some.
We're going to start with Bill, and I'll work my way up, and then we'll finish. Bill,
Work your way up. Wow. Ouch. Okay.
I'm
Jesus.
in the order of the chat in Discord. Come on.
Yeah.
No,
Backpedal. Go ahead.
Okay, so like from down here in the undergrowth, I've been involved with the on the RPG Vienna boards. We've seen an uptick of people coming in going, "Hey, I'm new. We'd like to try this." So there's definitely we see have do a sort of regular Friday anyone drop in thing, and it has. We have seen a bunch more people kind of stopping in, going like, "Hey, what's all this about? How do I do it?" So it has definitely upticked, and we are, and we're setting up for. We're going to try and put out to try and see if we can flush more people out of the undergrowth, because I reckon there's a bunch of folk who will be like, "Oh yeah, hey, what's this? Let's try it." And we've just had a huge poster campaign across everywhere going Dungeons and Dragons, it's aces. And we from the trailer alone, even if people haven't seen the movie, going like, this is the kind of wacky hijinks that's involved in the game. So even if people haven't even gone to the movie, I reckon they'll be going like, "Oh yeah, hang on, let me give this thing a shot." Or more likely, when my buddy Fred says, "Oh, I'm running a D&D session," "Oh, okay, yeah, cool, count me in."
Colin, what do you reckon? Is this a good advocate for the game?
I think it probably is. I don't know if that was its intent. I think this was just. I think the move into the bigger mainstream media is a way to drive money, but whether the goal ultimately is to drive money by selling more D&D books or not is I doubt it. I think they'll make more money by taking your cool IP and just spinning it into a succession of good movies and a succession of TV shows and things like that. Will it drive more people into the tabletop game? Yes. But is that the goal? Yeah, probably not. That would be my take.
All right, Jude. What's your
Yeah, I'm gonna have to disagree here slightly and say, in a vacuum, no. I don't think this movie drives up D&D players at all. Mainly because by itself, there is no indication this is a game. There's no indication there is anything beyond this film other than a fantasy IP. I think what will drive and what has already driven numbers up is Wizards using this moment to go out to players and say, "Hey, you've seen the film. Here is something really cool you can do." And they've put up on D&D Beyond this solo mission you can play with just yourself to get a feel of the game. They're releasing a lot of merchandise to hit the kids up, to introduce them to the wider world, and in that merchandise they have references to the books and the games stuff. Directly, I think if you sit down and watch this film, you know nothing about D&D, you come away, I don't think you're going to go, "Oh, that's a game I should play," because there's no indication that that's what's happening. But I do think from it, Wizards will use it to help drive people into the area. Unlike Stranger Things, where you had people literally playing the game and every indication it was a game, that's not true in the movie. So I think I think in a vacuum, the movie doesn't cause an uptick, but it's utilized, and the momentum that it creates is utilized to provide an avenue for Wizards to draw people in.
excellent? Yeah. Yeah, I think it does a good job of raising awareness around D&D. I'm still waiting for my big Chris Pine face on a box set to bring me back into the game. I want the next black box D&D to just be big Chris Pine face on it.
It's totally
Maybe it'd be known as the Pine Box.
Oh.
It's going to get outsold by the Rodriguez box.
Oh man, that girl goes hard. It's you want to see barbarian, everyone's like the druids. The best things move. The druids get really cool stuff. barbarians represent this movie.
Yeah,
Man.
the barbarian's the one who built their character right and does 90% of the fighting. So
Yeah.
you know,
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
min max her to the core. You know,
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay,
Simon
folks.
Simon went for background. She went for the actual stats.
We could do another episode where we dissect each of their character sheets, try and figure out kind of what the vibe is of where they're coming from. But for now, look, this has been the Adventure Party. I've been joined by Jude and Colin, and lastest but certainly not leastest, Bill, who's been all of you have been contributors on the show before, and I can't wait to have you back again. For presumably we're doing the review of
The TV series, right? Dragonlance is coming.
Is it a Dragonlance TV series?
That has been heavily nodded at by what's his name? Ex-football player.
Manganiello?
Manganiello?
I was gonna say Marty Sofia Vergara.
But
How
for
can I
now-
remember her name? But anyways, go on.
questions for another time. Until then, we'll draw the veil and say, this party's over. Thank you for listening to the Adventuring Party. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, you can head on over to SpeakPipe and drop us a line. Or you can join us on our Discord server, where we keep the party going after hours. Otherwise, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, or Twitter, or you can email the hosts at party@theadventuringparty.net. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike version 3 license, but you probably knew that already. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and look forward to seeing you back here next week. Goodbye.